Hello, so welcome to District 4, the best place to be for information and news. I'm your host, A-Love. We are talking financial literacy. And I'm laughing because everyone was looking at the title kind of going, okay, what does that mean? The title is Credit Repair, Debts, and Who Cares? And it's probably the who cares part that's actually getting to you, because you're probably thinking to yourself, I'm not exactly sure what that means. So basically, any financial level, we all know this. There's two things you're going to have to deal with. Taxes, which we covered in the last video, and credit. I don't care how much money you have. You can be extremely wealthy. If you have bad credit, it is going to affect. So I had to cover this subject. I also get a whole lot of questions about this particular subject because it is of interest, and particularly if you are of a broke mindset and you've had it, all your life. You don't even know if it can be repaired. So I had so many questions, as I did with the taxes and finances and all those things, that I decided to do an entire series on it. So let's talk about, or an entire show within the series. So let's talk about that. Let's start first by understanding that it can be repaired. I can't tell you, and I probably have said this a million times, how many people continue on with bad credit, into the decades. Like they started when they were 22 and struggling, and they continued to keep it throughout their 30s, and then messed up again in their late 30s, and then continued to have it in their 40s. And then from their 40s, it just kept going. It's just they never had a chance to have good credit. Now, some of you looking at that going, why is that possible? No, it is possible. Okay, because some of you are looking at me going, yeah, I have bad credit right now. Then there's some of you that are sort of in the middle. You kind of had good credit at one point, and then something happened. COVID, you lost your job, you were already over your expenses in the first place, and you were relying very heavily on those paychecks, and boom, your credit score drops because you cannot afford to pay. Even if you're downsizing, you still can't afford to pay what you did have, so you have to make different arrangements, which means your credit score will probably drop. And then there's a lot of wealthy people, rich people in those categories that also lose their credit. Maybe your business took out a loan and you were doing fine, and then suddenly, boom, but you're going to end up owing a considerable larger sum than somebody that is just broke, right? Because now you're wealthy. Now they gave you a bigger loan. Your risks were larger. Your interest rate may have been low, but your payback rate or penalties for that payback rate might have been different. You can be as much as $4 billion in debt or $1 million in debt. And it's a debt that, maybe if you're in a broke mindset, you can't imagine, but the person's wealthy on paper, maybe. We don't know the circumstances within the confines of that wealth, but you can lose it based on your credit, right? So here we're going to talk about credit. So the first thing is credit can be repaired. I say all that to say that credit can be repaired. So you're like, okay, I got it. You call credit repair. No, you don't have to do that. Now you can. That is an option, but you also, I'm going to tell you throughout this, you have to be careful where you go, right? Because you're spending money, sometimes you don't even need to spend. So let's just keep that in mind. But I'll get into that a little bit more because it's quite a bit to cover on this particular topic. So let's start with just some technical basics, right? So let's say what is considered bad credit, right? You're like mine, okay? No, what is considered bad credit? So sometimes you have, it's all gonna build to the FICO score. So we need to understand that first, right? So you have to understand a means to an end. A lot of people don't. They think of individual, okay, just take everything off and therefore I will have good credit. Or, it's new, so I'm just going to build credit and then therefore I will have good credit. But it's not always that cut and dry. I'll give you an example. Sometimes something that's bad on your credit, maybe you have a credit card and you paid late on that credit card and you go in and you remove it from your credit and then all of a sudden your credit score drops and you're like, wait, I thought the credit was they're supposed to take up my credit score. You're all mad. But the reality of the situation is what you did was reduce your credit history because maybe that account was the longest account that you had. So it would have been better for you not to remove it, but just to deal with the inaccuracies in the payment structure. I'm going to tell you how to do that. So in that case, it's better for you to keep it on there. It's the longest credit history you have, and that's a larger percentage of your credit rating ranking than your payments. I'm not saying leave the bad payments on there, but I am saying that you should have left that account on there, okay? So it's stuff like that we're talking about. So let's start with those basics. So the first thing you should do if you want to repair your credit is actually you want to remove personal information that's not accurate. You're like, what? Some of you are looking like, yeah, I know, I got it. But some of you are like, what are you talking about? Like, why would I do that? I have to get out the inaccuracies. That's everybody's desperate attempt. But sometimes you're missing points because you have about 4 or 5 addresses that you just didn't bother to take off, and all those are linked to bills that you could have even paid, but just aren't reporting accurately. And if you remove that address, you're not linked to them anymore. Also, many people don't know that Experian has links to your address. There's identification numbers connected to those. You say, so you have 4 or 5 addresses, 4 or 5 identification numbers. They're not going to track and put them all together. They're going to keep them separate, and therefore you're going to owe bills attached to each of those addresses that are attached to that number. Okay, you following me? You're like, what is she talking about? This is a video I promise you're going to have to watch multiple times because it's a lot of information. And I tell you it's accurate because I did get it from people that work at the credit bureaus. Okay, so I'm not making this stuff up. This is just not going off on a whim. It's accurate information. And you can always fact check or look up anything that I'm saying. But the first thing that makes more sense is to remove those addresses, especially if it's in your Experian account. Equifax and TransUnion aren't as strict on that, but Experian is. Another thing you want to think about is multiple names that you may have. Maybe you're a woman and you've been married. You want to make sure that that's the name that's on your credit bureau, not your maiden name or any nicknames or whatever else you may have had on there. Name changes as well for actors and people that work in an industry where you can't keep the same name because maybe someone else has that name legally binded, for example. Let's say, for example, Brad Pitt's real name is William Pitt, right? But he can't use the name William Pitt because there's another actor in that works under that name before he became who he became. So he changed his name to Brad, which may be his middle name, I don't know, but he changed it to that because legally, as an actor, he couldn't use the name William. Okay? So I believe his name is Brad, but that's neither here nor there. The point of the matter is that sometimes you have to change your name. Now, he probably needed to do that also on his credit score. I don't know if he did or not, but that's what you really would need to do in order to keep everything cohesive, everything up to date, everything reporting accurately, and to get the points that you have could be losing by having multiple addresses and names on your credit. Okay. Take notes, it's only going to get faster. And so then also late payment. So this is a big one. Okay. So I'll give you some common sense that most people do know, and not everybody does, but a lot of people know that you get 30 days to pay a bill before it is technically credit-wise considered late, right? So if your bill's due on the 8th and you pay before the 8th of the next month, it's not going to be reported to any credit bureaus. Now, however, if your bill is due on the 8th and technically you pay on the 9th, it's reported as late. You're like, what? That's the cutoff. The cutoff is 30 days. So some of you are like, yeah, obviously. And some of you are like, first of all, I don't even know what she's talking about yet. But that's the reality of the situation. So you get 30 days, not 31. And my point is to get you to understand the technicals. Now remember, this video and the video before that are more technical videos. They're talking about taxes and they're talking about credit repairs and debts and who to report to. These are all of these types of things. So this requires multiple times looking at it and maybe some note taking, which you probably have been doing already, but if you haven't been, in particularly this one, because there's some gems in here that are really going to help you, that you can apply to your credit and do what you need to do to up your FICO score. So I say all that to say that the 30 days, so to get you in the habit of understanding it's not 31, it's not 32 days, it's literally technically reported on after the 30 days, and that is legit. Nobody plays with that, right? So sometimes you might have a credit card. Maybe you paid that Friday because that's when you got paid, but it was 4 days after your due date, and you go a couple of years, you go back, you look at this credit card that you think you've paid on time, and you discover you have a late payment on there. What? I never paid late, and you just go all off and you swear you've never paid late, but the date is really what's going to tell you the truth. It's going to tell you, technically you did pay late, and they decided to report that was late because you paid after the 30 days. So I want you to be aware of that if you go back and see that there's late payments that you're not aware of. Now, there's a way to still even remove those off of your credit rating and increase your credit rating, because it'll drop if you have however many days inaccurate you are, right? 30 days, 60 days, 80 days. The longer the debt, actually the better as far as reporting, because they try to go by as much recent. Here's some trivia. If you are late, let's say one time, you've passed the 30 days, you paid late, they reported to your credit, you have 12 consecutive payments before it is not negative on your credit. Now, it's still possibly reported if you don't remove it, but it is what will rebuild, to compensate for that one late payment. So let's say you have a couple of months. Let's say you go 1 month and then you pay well for 6 months, and then you miss a couple more payments, and then but you're paying, but you're just late, and then you go another 6 months. You just keep resetting every time. Every time you go, even if you went 6 full months, you could have went 11 months. And on that 12th month, you paid late, you just started all over again. And this is the trick of credit. This is the trick of your credit rating. This is what works with your FICO score. This is what people aren't getting. They said, I have a late payment, but it was like 11 months ago. I've been paying, but it doesn't matter. It takes 12 consecutive payments. If you pay monthly, do the math, that's really a year. So you have an entire year to have to pay consecutively to compensate for one. Think about that. Because how many times you're late in a row is bad. But even if you try to repair it and you don't understand that you have to pay consecutively for 12 months, you keep resetting your bad credit. Not intentionally. I mean, you just didn't know, right? If you're watching this video and now you know, but prior to that, many people didn't know that. You just thought you paid on time for a couple of months, and what are you talking about by the time you look at that and you see that it's affecting your credit negatively, particularly if you want to buy a home. For those of you that are at the financial place of home purchasing, or you're purchasing multiple homes or flipping houses or whatever the case may be, and it needs to be in your name, you need to understand that as well. You need to understand when they run your credit and they look back and you've done everything right up to 11 and a half months, but you didn't go 12, that's still going to be a ding on your credit. Okay? Let's see. So the question always is posed on, what credit repair companies have to offer, right? What are they actually doing? Which ones work and which ones don't? So I can't tell you what all credit repair companies do. I want to pretend that I can, because some of them aren't all doing legal stuff. But I can tell you that if you pay a lump sum up front it is not legal. You are not, they're supposed to do technically the work first and then you pay, right? So a monthly payment means, yeah, they're gonna start the work and then you pay, and then, but if you're paying, $700, $800, $12,000, whatever it is up front, and they haven't done any work yet, that's technically not legal, technically. Are there ways around it? Probably, but in real life, you should be questioning what they're doing to get the stuff off your credit if they're making you pay a lump sum. Okay? Just an FYI, consider that a little bonus trivia there. So also, we talk about Goodwill Letters. So, okay, let's continue on the road of late payments. So let's say you have late payments and you want to challenge them, you want to dispute them. Now, what happens and how do you do that, right? So first thing you want to do is you want to get your credit report free. It is free annually. I think it's annualcreditreport.com, maybe one of the sites, or you can go to the actual credit bureaus themselves and write a letter and they will send you your report back. You may even be able to do it online, but I'm old school, but so pretty much everything's online now. Check it out. You might be able to do it, but you can retrieve your credit report. And some people can give it to you instantly, and it is free, so you don't have to pay. Once you do that and you see what is dinging your credit, sometimes you run your credit. These are for newer people, and you realize you just don't have enough history. Could be that simple, or you could realize, that your late payment has time to, would be time to roll off. But let's say you haven't gotten there yet. Let's just say you just have late payments and they're kind of recent and you want to get them off your credit. First of all, it's going to take a long time, right? It's going to take some time because you're going to have to write letters. This is what people say. Don't pay a credit reporting agency. You can do this yourself. You can write 4 or 5 letters to each, the Goodwill Letters. I even know the name of them. Goodwill Letters. And yes, but the reality is you don't know what you're writing or why. You just write a letter blindly. Of course the company's going to listen, because any company that has good standing and cares about process is going to read your letter and follow some processes with that. But the reality is you could write the wrong letter. This is why people hire agencies. But not that you have to, but that's sometimes part of the problem, is that you wrote a letter and you said, this isn't mine. Let's do that, for example. Let's say, for example, I'm like, what? This isn't mine. And I'm all mad, and I'm eloquent too, elegantly written. And you write the letter and you realize you can put it in the mail and you mail it, or you do it online, whichever. And they go, yeah, it is. Back on your credit. You're like, what do you mean? It's because you didn't follow the procedure. To just say something's not yours, it is one challenge, but it has to be challenged for a reason. Well, you're saying it's not yours, but why? Oh, okay, maybe you don't need a why. Maybe you need to show me proof. Here's what you're doing wrong if you're doing that. You have to validate the debt. The term is a legal term, to validate the debt, because according to their rule book for creditors, I'm going to look at some notes here too. You have to, give me a second, I'm sorry. There's so much on this that the notes are plentiful, as it were. Yeah, you have to, according to the rule book, and everybody knows what it is, but I'm not thinking about it right now. I want to make sure I'm accurate, though. Okay, so you have to, the first step in a letter of goodwill, quote unquote, is whether or not you're validating the debt. So that means, for example, creditor calls you. You owe a credit card of some sort. And they ring in, and you pick up the phone and you're like, yes. And they're like, is this, so-and-so? And you say, yeah, this is how can I help you? And they say, we want to negotiate with this debt that you have. And you go, well, how much do I need to pay? You just validated the debt, and you didn't have to. Right? You write a letter to the credit company, and you all you're doing at that point with them is validating that you owe that money. So more than likely, unless you tell them how that's not yours, and even if you do that, it's still going to validate the debt if the debt is in your name. What you want to do is have them validate the debt. You're like, wait, didn't you just say don't do that? No. I said you don't validate the debt. Don't write in there negotiating. You write in there questioning the validity of the debt. That's their job. That's not your job. We tend to do that because we get hyper, and maybe you're trying to buy a house and suddenly this old debt just comes running up and you're like, I need to get this off my credit, especially if you're hyper responsible. You're just like, oh my God, I can't believe it. You panic and you run and you start making arrangements to make the payment. Right there, you just validated the debt. And you don't even know if you needed to. Right? Because there's a lot of factors that go into the fact that you may not have needed to validate that debt. So you're like, what are you? I'm confused now, Alex. What are you typing? Okay, so I'm talking about the term validation. Sometimes people don't understand this part of when you're trying to fix something on your letter writing. Is a legal term. So there are certain processes connected to that particular phrase. So if you say, I don't believe this is my debt, but I need you to validate it, that's different. That's a different process than you just saying this isn't mine. They're going to look at it and see if your name's on it, is your date, something attached to it. Okay, it's yours. And that's not what you want, because the statute of limitations is going to run out on that debt. You don't know. Right? You could, but once you do that, here's a little tip. We've got people walking by. They're doing repairs. Okay, so you may hear a little background noise, but it's just because, But this is what we're talking about. So we're talking the first step for you to do is to validate the debt. They need to validate it. So don't write a letter confirming that you're okay with this debt, because you're basically saying, okay, even if you're complaining about the debt, you're still okay in the debt. It stays in your credit. Okay? So that would be step number one. First thing you ever want to do is validate or invalidate the debt, but you make them do it. Even if it's a credit with the collections company that call you to death. One of the questions somebody once asked me was like, okay, so I'm in collections and they keep harassing me. Do I do a cease and desist letter? I said, well, that would indicate that you're already talking to them, which you don't need to do. So you're like, what? Now I'm confused. That's what we're talking about. The first thing you do when a collections company calls you is you send the debt back to the debtor. You don't validate anything with them. You don't even have to have conversations with them. You say, I don't owe you money, but I need you to send it back to the debtor if that's true. You don't confirm. You don't start making payment arrangements. You don't go back and forth with them. For those of you that are, a little more raw with it, you don't want to start cussing them out. No, you don't do any of that. You want to write any letters for those of you that are a little more refined. You don't want to do anything with the collection company because 9 times out of 10, your information was sold to them in the first place. So they don't have a way to validate the debt. So you either tell them, listen, I don't owe you money. I don't know. Can you tell me how this is valid? You need to show me proof of validation, and you need to do it in writing. Chances are they're going to send it back to the debtor, or you just tell them to do that. Send that back to the debtor. You don't have to do anything. The fact that she was getting harassing calls, or he or she was getting harassing calls from the collections agency meant she was dealing with the collection agencies. What you're doing when you do that is validating the debt. So all they have to do at that point is either get you to pay it. That's it. You've already said it's yours. Even if you're arguing, saying, man, my cousin, I put it in his name, and you're like, this is my debt. That's all they're hearing. They don't hear the rest of that. They hear, this is my debt. For those of you, it's my son, I signed his student loan, and, I tried to make him responsible. anything that you're saying to the collection agency is validating the debt. You're just validating the debt. So of course they're going to harass you because you just told them the debt was yours, right? So tip on that one, send it back to the creditor. First of all, you want to deal with the debtor in the first place. And second of all, credit collection companies earn money. That's the whole point of them. They're going to try to get you to pay the max. Here's another tip on dealing with collection agencies. Let's say you don't know what I just told you. And you're like, okay, listen, I'm trying to buy a house. I want to, take care of this. Yeah, this was my son's student loan, or yeah, it was my cousin's debt, but you know what? I'm going to go ahead and pay it. Okay, first thing you say, I want to, negotiate a settlement. I want to pay the whole thing. And let's say they say, okay. They're like, okay, we'll sell for $900. I don't know. I'll make up a number, right? So you sell for $900, and then 6 months later, you get another call from another creditor for the other half. You got people coming to the building. But the problem with that is that you still have already validated the debt because you paid half of it. And you started over the statute of limitations, which you don't want to do. You don't want to restart over the statute. And you're like, you keep talking about statute of limitations. What does that mean? What it means is there's a certain limit, right? In every state, it's different. But that can stay on your credit and be reported. Every time you pay or validate or make a settlement or anything like that, you start over the statute of limitations. So let's say you were a month away from the statute of limitations. And you guys probably hear that. We got a lot going on today. There's a lot going on today, so it's live, so we really don't get a chance. But
okay, thank you.
Okay. So you okay, so yeah, so every time you do that, you start over the statute of limitations, which you don't want to do. Don't want to. You have to go the whole, 7 years if it's 7 years again, or depending upon how they report it is another reason that statute of limitation applies. If you use California, for example, if they phone it in, it's 4 years, not 7. You're like, what? Look it up. If you're not in the state of California, I don't know what the other states is, but you need to look up the process which they use in order to bring about the report, to report it on your credit. I know, take notes, I'm telling you, this is going to be some good stuff. Take some, and I'm not even done yet. So take some notes. So that's another part of it. Also, when it comes to Goodwill letters, I say all that to say you need to know what to write. And that's very important because there's certain terms that you can use within the confines of those letters that will not only expedite the process, but the process will be lengthy regardless in some cases. In most cases, it's just going to take time. Because the creditor has to answer as well. So, and then the terms make a difference with whether or not it can actually be removed. Yeah, because like I said, using that as the example of validating the debt. Some good stuff. All right, so I'm going to answer some questions at this point because I feel like I've got a lot of bases here, but I want to make sure I'm covering things that people need. Somebody asked, is it better to have new credit or bad credit? Okay, there's actually other options out there, but if you're caught between this rock and hard place, I'm laughing because these are obvious questions, but it's just they're both bad, right? Because new credit means you have no history, and bad credit means you have a history, but it's not good. But if you're stuck in this place, I would go back to what I said earlier. How bad is it? Let's say you have 1 or 2 late payments, but your credit history with that company is 10 years. Do not delete that. Don't delete that, because you're gonna make it harder for you to get future credit, especially if that's your only account. Like, let's say you're new and you had like 2 credit cards. You have one that you just have for 5 years. You have this last one you have for 20 years, which missed 1 or 2 payments on that. And you go in and you delete it because you're trying to make your credit better. It's gonna drop. Your score is actually going to drop. It is gonna drop dramatically. So, if you're asking, is it better to have new credit or bad credit? It depends on the extent of the bad credit and how long you've had your accounts, would be my general answer. And just for reference, these are general answers. I haven't seen anybody's credit report, anybody's finances. I don't know what, so this is just me answering in general to give you knowledge and understanding that's universal. How about that? Okay. More questions. Let's see what we got. Can you opt out of an agency? Oh. People. Okay, so technically, can you opt out of an agency? Possibly, right? Can you do it realistically? No. Because you have to remember, or if you don't know, here's some trivia for you. Credit agencies pay to subscribe, quote unquote, to databases that report that information to them. So they pay to report it. So you can opt out, but that doesn't mean that information is not going to be given, right? If anything, if you opt out, you're just making yourself blind to what you actually have, because you're opting to not even get a free credit report. So I wouldn't, you can do it, yeah. Can you? Yeah, of course, technically. But is it optimum? Does it make sense for you as a consumer? Probably not. It just doesn't, it just doesn't. But I can't tell you what to do. But if you just so happen to try to opt out, I would think that it probably would hurt you more than it would help you. I mean, that's the reality of the situation. Hang on one second. All right, so another thing is to, I guess, when you're talking about opting out, and the reality is that you can't do that. I guess how should I say this? I guess the best way to say this, okay, so I'm trying to think of how to put this so that it's actually a little more simple than it actually is. Not to disrespect the audience, but just to make it simple, because sometimes it's so much information that I'm giving you right now that it can be confusing. I guess the best way is I'm trying to say is if you opt out of one agency or one type of agency, like say for example you opt out of, I don't know, one of the agencies, and then you go to apply for a home. That is a different set of reporting. And you might think, oh, well, you cleared yourself because I'm off of this one agency, this credit agency, but the reporting for that credit is a different agency, not related to the first one. So, will you still be denied your home? Yeah, because it's coming from a different set of agencies. You know what I mean? So, like I said, I say all that to say, in my opinion, opting out is more of a deficit for you because it just keeps you from having the information that you need than it does to keep you concealed, as you might be thinking, from the credit rating agencies. So I know that's given as advice a lot of times, but I personally don't think that's, I wouldn't say yes or no to that, but I feel like, in my opinion, I would. Okay? Somebody said, can you, it says, can you, do a security freeze on your credit report? Guys, people. these little techniques that people give you. Okay, so can you do a credit freeze? Technically, it's another one that you can say yes to. Technically, it is an option that is offered to you that you can exercise. So if you're asking, can you? Yes. Should you? Whole nother answer. Because it sort of goes back to the reality that it depends on, the agencies. There's always other agencies that will allow for reporting and for other data that aren't related to the agency you're opting out of. There's not a likelihood that you're going to opt out of every agency that ever exists. And even so, it doesn't take away from the information that's already there. So even if you opt out, you're opting out of certain agencies, but they still have access to your information that's already there. You have a 20-year credit history and you decide to opt out. I mean, are you really helping yourself? So, or you put a freeze on it. Oh, I'm going to freeze this particular, credit. It's not going to take away from what's there. So a freeze will freeze certain future, accesses to your information, but what you have is already there. So yes, technically, in my opinion, does it make sense? It really doesn't. But can you do that if for some reason something happened? Maybe. I'd have to look at what you're doing it for. But most people are doing it to sort of, keep a distance, quote unquote, from the creditors. And it doesn't really usually work for that. So that's my answer to that. They can resell oh, I already said, okay. I'm trying to make the question relevant to oh, here's a good one. Okay, so judgments, tax liens, and bankruptcies, can they be removed from your credit? Yes, they actually can. In the sense that there is a process to do that. Now, do I have the authority to say that your specific case is going to happen? No. General answer. Yes. So I'll give you the process, and then I'll tell you a little bit of a bonus that will probably help you a little better, right? So, and generally, you want to contact the credit bureau, right? You want to report it as an inaccuracy. Now, I want to define and give an understanding of what an inaccuracy is. Because most people think inaccuracy actually means, well, it's not my debt, or I didn't do that, or it's not late. That's not really true, necessarily. It can be simply that it's not. Okay, so accuracies on your credit report or inaccuracies on your credit report are based on how they are reported, not based on whether or not you're necessarily connected to that company. If that makes sense. So I'll give you an example. So let's say I had a late payment in December, but it was reported on my credit report in May. That's an inaccuracy. It's inaccurate. It's not accurately reported. The length of time would be greater and longer, right? So you can write that and say, this needs to be removed because it's not accurate. It is an inaccuracy, and if they check it, they're going to realize that that's not right. So it is reported inaccurately. That's sort of, if you're looking at it, what the term inaccuracies would mean. Now I tell you that to say, you have to look at that when you go to challenge something as strong as, say, a judgment or, a tax lien or bankruptcy. You also, there's one way to, okay, so here's some information. Okay, now this is going to be, maybe not as, this is going to be a bonus, right? So the court doesn't report to your credit. It just doesn't. I mean, it's like you got a tax lien, you got a child support, you've got a bankruptcy. Those are all legal things. They involve the court, right? But the court doesn't report. So how can that be accurately reported? There's no way they have the information. So what you can do is you can go to the court and you ask them, was this reported to the credit bureau? And they'll be like, what are you talking about? You already go there knowing that the answer is probably going to be no, right? Like, no. Like, I'm sorry that it's on there, but we don't report. Then you go back with that information to the creditors and say, this is not accurately reported. It can't be because you don't have the information. So go back and check that. And then more than likely they have to remove it because that's not accurately reported. It can't be because they don't have the information from the court, right? Why is it on your credit? Because it is a public record. That's why. It's not on your credit because the court took the time out of their busy day to go to your credit, to work with the credit bureaus. This has nothing to do with that. The credit agencies themselves maybe have a list, or they get data, or they pay to get this information, and then they put it on there themselves. Do you understand? So that's one way, and that's information that's probably like, what? What do you mean? Like, I didn't know any of this. That's one way. But I come from a legal background, right? So legally, if you really want to step it up, because this is going to require you doing a lot of paperwork, you close the file. You don't make it public, right? Close it. Seal it. It's called sealing, right? Seal the file. Sealing means nobody has public access to that. That's my legal advice. No, it's not my legal advice. Don't take. Sorry. Correction. That's something I know you can do legally, right? Legally, you can just simply seal the file, and there's no longer public. That is a legal process. I'm not telling you to do that. I'm just saying legally, you can seal the files if it's a court document. I know. Take some notes. Take some. You're like, what? Take notes. That was an interesting one. I'm gonna let you hold on that one a little bit because it is an interesting one. Just for, I think I had a question in here and I want to answer that because it goes along the same lines. There was a question in here about evictions and getting evictions off their credit. And along the same line, okay, so there's a couple of things that I want to tell you in a legal sense that will help you on your credit report, okay? So, first of all, many people don't know you can fight an eviction up until the day the marshal locks you out. Once you're locked out, okay, there's not any negotiation. Eviction process is complete. But evictions, just like anything else, have a process. And so you want to catch them as early as possible. So they put that 3-day pay or quit on your door and you know you can't pay it. You don't have to just move. You can go to court. You can actually fight an unlawful detainer before it becomes an eviction. Because the eviction becomes the last process, or it becomes a process to avoid the unlawful detainer. But you have to go through the steps of those things, which means you get paperwork for all of this stuff. Which is why the judge is less lenient. Because by the time you get locked out, you didn't do a whole bunch of stuff in between that, and the judge doesn't want to hear it. The judge is like, okay, so you got a 3-day pay or quit. Did they not serve you with that? Yeah, they did. Okay, did you get, you went to the trial for the unlawful detainer? No, man, I didn't show up. Okay, so did you file any paperwork to have a stay? No, I didn't do. So there's a whole bunch of stuff you didn't do. And then you got locked down. And now you want to come, on the day you got locked down and be like, at the marshal's office, you've been at the wrong place. Tell the marshal, please don't lock me out. Which, just a little note, he may give you time if you call the office directly. Just a little note, if you're desperate and at the last minute and you you waited too long. But prior to that, no, you can fight against an unlawful detainer. You don't have to get evicted. You don't have to cave in because they served you 3-day pay or quit. You can actually go to court, and then sometimes the settlement will happen and you don't have to move at all. Side note, right, that's a bonus. But in real life, I say that to say at the end of that process, you can ask the judge right then and there, you can seal it. And that's what it means. It means close it. Somebody can access it publicly. Right? You can still go back and do that later. Let's say you just found that out because you're watching this video. You just heard me. You're like, oh my God, it's on my credit. You know, what do I do? It's a public record already. You can go back and, it's paperwork though. And you have to show up in court and you have to, you know, get the judge to grant the order. But if you have a legit reason, you know, sometimes the lawyers on the other side will agree to that when you make it a part of your settlement. If I move, can you please seal the file? If, you know, if I pay, can you please seal the file? Or, you know, since I have to stay here and the judge ordered that I can stay, can we please seal the file? So those are things you can do, you know, to keep it from being public record so that it doesn't report on your credit. But I say all that to say that that is why it's reporting on your credit, because it's public record. But it's not reporting on your credit because the court takes the time out to report to your credit bureau. I mean, they don't, I mean, if you think about it and you've ever worked in the legal system, it just doesn't even make sense. The processes are just, it's too much going on already, right? So, little fun fact on that one. Can student loans be removed? They actually can. I don't have full process of that. I would have to ask and get that for you. I'll tell you point blank if I don't know something. I do understand that you can have that happen. Under what circumstances that process happens, not sure. I will get back to you on that. But I wanted to let you know that I got the question. Statute of limitations depends on the states. I feel like somebody asked this, you know, statute of limitations, can you challenge it? Yes, you can challenge that with regards to your credit. I would hope that you would want to do that anyway. Like, you have somebody, and this goes back to the first part, but if someone calls you and you I don't know, you had an eviction 8 years ago, and they call you and they're like, hey, you can pay this, and you're like, I'm gonna pay it. You just start it all over. So I want to remind you of that. Like, yeah, I'm gonna pay it. Let me start making payments, and you know, I don't know, let's say it's $4,000 or whatever. You start paying, you know, $500, and then you want to make payments. Whatever the arrangement, I don't care if you pay $200 and you make it up. You just start it over. So check that before you start making arrangements to just pay. With that, and this goes to also when you're working with a collections company, let's say you're going to pay it. Like, you're just like, forget it. I'm paying it. I don't want to worry about it anymore. I don't want it to be resold. I don't want it to come back to haunt me. I don't want to look up the statute of limitations. I'm going to pay it. If you just pay that, make sure part of that, and it's in writing, that it is removed from your credit. Because if you don't, some of the things that they will do is leave it on your credit and just put a zero there. Now, a zero is good, right? But it being removed is really the function. And you have to make that a part of your payment. Otherwise, they're not going to do it. And it can be resold in that case because it's still technically on your credit, right? I'll tell you my own personal experience. When I was young, I was in college, and they pulled my credit report. And I had a decent FICO score, but I had a whole, like maybe 4 credit cards that I had closed that were still on there, but they reported as 0. I was like, what? You know, like, but it damaged my score, right? My score was lower. And it didn't make sense to me, and I'm like, and the lady did say, why don't you just get these removed? Because it's considered, you know, debt. Even though it's a 0, it's debt. So I went and had them removed. But I had to learn that the hard way by having those on there. Yep. Okay. What do you think of CPN? CPNs. People. Okay. For those of you that don't know the acronym CPN, this person is referring to a credit profile number. Okay, first of all, this is not legal. It just isn't. Now, for every law, there is a person that can teach you how to walk a fine line between it, right? You don't want to do that with a CPN. Can it be done? Yes. Is it, can you walk a fine line where it can be okay? Maybe. Should you? No. That's my opinion. You're asking my opinion on it. No, I wouldn't even dabble in this area, because if it goes wrong, okay, even if you're using let's say you did it through a credit repair agency that was not, that was walking a fine line, and it's federal, right? This is a federal offense. Not only is it a federal offense, but they don't go after the credit repair company. They're gonna go after you. You. You may have paid them for this information and they might say okay and everything. But when it comes down to something going wrong with that situation and the feds come after, they come after you. They're not coming after the credit repair company, because the credit repair company is already walking a fine line in the first place, right? And anything you do like this, it's going to be based on the fact that your signature is on everything. They make you sign everything. This is how you're going to be held accountable for the CPN number that you're using. And you want to ask yourself where they're getting them from, right? Sometimes the people don't even know where the numbers come from. Okay? So I would just put a big X on this part of the lecture, because I don't think you should, don't even use a credit repair company that does that. Stay away from CPNs, because literally it's a federal offense. It is not legal. I'm sorry. Now they try to walk a fine line and all that stuff, but it's not. It's not even worth it. And like I said, it's not. You're just gonna go to state court. You're gonna go to federal court. Think about that. Is it worth it for you to just not repair your credit faster, quote unquote? Take the long route. It's more permanent anyway. So I would say I don't recommend it. Okay? Let me see. Can you remove evictions from your credit? Yeah, I did just talk about that earlier. You might not have seen that. But yeah, go back earlier in the video and I do talk about evictions, judgments, liens, child support type, any legal documents that the court had to sanction. I did talk about that not too long ago. So do you agree with the trade line extension? People, what are you guys are doing to repair your credit? This could go either way, because it's not illegal. There's nothing illegal about it at all. But there is a tragedy that can happen with that if it's a person that's not trusted. So let's say, and for those of you that don't know what they're saying by a trade line extension, it's basically, okay, let's say I own a business. I have business credit, for example. And you want to build your credit, or you don't have as much credit, and I have 20 years of business credit built. I can put you on something. So let's say it's the business credit card. And it doesn't have to be a business. You could be a regular consumer. I could just have a Macy's card, for example, or a credit card, for example, and I add you to that so that you can build a line of credit as well. Which makes beautiful sense if it's a family member or somebody you trust. The problem goes awry is if you're using a service to do this. Because there's the risk that, okay, first of all, it happens with multiple people. You cannot predict what other people are going to do. Maybe you are fine with the situation and everything is going well. But somebody may do something like, what? Okay, let's say it's a credit card, just for the sake of explanation. Let's say it's a credit card. And the person's like, okay, I've got this, sideline of credit, and, thank you, I'm on a credit card, and I'm going to open up 3 other credit cards with the same company, and, your credit starts to build. And then all of a sudden, person B, because you're person A, person B of, 18 people finally says, wait a minute, there's a credit card? There's a credit card? Oh. Well, how come I don't have it? They're just wondering. They just look on their credit and like, oh, I have a credit card? I didn't know I had a credit card. Let me call the company. And call the company, and they're like, I see here I have a line of credit and blah, 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 and, can I get access to that? And the person's like, well, yeah, I don't know, let me check on that. Okay, and the minute you get the check on that, and they see that there's like 8 people attached to this one account, or there's 20 people attached to this one account, guess what's going to happen? They're going to close it. They're going to close it. And once it's closed for everybody, including the person that gave you the sideline of credit. And forbid if anything else illegal is going on, because that's attached to your name too. But let's just say it's just simply that it's closed. What ends up happening is they're going to close all of your accounts. They're going to close that one that you had initially and the other 3 that you opened up down the line. What happens to your credit when you close accounts? Because your credit history then drops, because your payments are no longer in existence, and you don't have the credit card anymore. It is closed. Your credit score drops. Right? There's also another danger to that. Let's just say you're with somebody that's not a legal person, right? What they have access to is your information. And they may be using sideline credits from other people that A, may not be aware of it, and B, it could be you. And so when you discover, wait a minute, and it may be not in a good way, in a way that you're like, wait a minute, why do I have a Capital One, why do I have a Discover, or why do I have this, $10,000 limit on this, I didn't never apply for this, and in this person's name, and the person calls and says, wait a minute, somebody's using my credit. That person may be you. So you have to be careful, because even once you, separate yourself from the sideline of credit, if you get a chance to do that, they still have your information. They can still use it if they're, not a legal savvy person, in the sense that they're more criminal minded than they are going on the other side of the tracks. So, if it's a trusted person, it could probably be helpful, I would say. But if not, no. You don't want to do anything that's walking a line of possible, that could take, identity theft, basically. I was trying to think of another word, but it's basically identity theft. If they start taking your information, you don't even know they're using it. So a lot of times when you go to certain companies, it can be just simply somebody else's information. It's not maybe the person, or the company, quote unquote, right? I suspect you may have done this already, but be careful. It's like this, but it is legal. I'm not saying that it's illegal. It's not. It is legal. What do you do if? What to do if? Oh, if your car is repossessed. I'm sorry, I couldn't. What to do if your car is repossessed? Okay, so let's say, it depends. If your car was, repossessed and then sold, that is an inaccurate report. So it shouldn't still be on your credit. You can go back and say, wait a minute, this car was sold. Here's the updated report. You have a right to go to that company and find out what the car was sold for. They actually put that in writing for you. And that is technically an inaccurate report, because it's not that you didn't have the car at one time, but you no longer have it and the car has been sold. That's not an accurate report. So that's one way to seek to remove it. And then statute of limitations. I mean, check it. You know, sometimes you have a car in your credit and you had it in like college or something. And you're like, I'm, 50. Like, probably not that long, but like I'm 38 at this point. Or it can be in someone else's name. Somebody asked me that question first. What do you do if it's in somebody else's name? Meaning you sign for someone else. Now, I can't speak for anybody else, but I personally have done this before where there was something and somebody put in my name and I went back to the creditor. Creditor removed it from my credit report. Now, will this happen every time? I don't know. But is that an option? Yes, because people tend to understand something like that. But, when you start signing for stuff, it tends to be more risky because you are going to be somewhat responsible, at least for the actions of taking care of it if the other person doesn't take care of it. We all know this, right? This is just, but that qualifies to old cars too. And then sometimes, it's better to just have it zeroed out. Let's say it wasn't yours, but you need to zero it. You know what I mean? It's better that zero be there than that, not being, that looks like you haven't paid for a car that's already sold. You know what I mean? So I think that, which was a lot of information, a whole lot of questions, but I think a lot of jewel information, a lot of good tips, a lot of stuff. One last thing I wanted to give you is there's a site that I learned about recently. It's called Creditboards.com. And I thought that was a good site to bring up because it gives you forms. And sometimes something isn't executed or finished or done or it's put back on your credit simply because you didn't ask the right question or you didn't use the right format. And, coming from a legal background, that happens all the time. You may be perfectly right about what you're saying, but because it's not in the correct format, something gets missed. So I highly recommend, if you're going to write letters and do Goodwill Letters and start that process and do it that way, that you remember that there's a formula. And so you want to check, and if you can get any templates or forms that help to use the correct lingo, that's going to be better for you. It's really why a lot of people go to credit repair agencies that are legit agencies, because they're able to know the lingo, know who to write. Sometimes you send a letter, it goes to the customer service department, and the customer service department really doesn't have the authority to do it. And so your letter has to be sent somewhere else, but you may not even know that it's sent somewhere else. You could have went directly to that person in the first place. All right, so make sure you like and subscribe. Make sure you repeat the series. This series in its totality is created to be watched multiple times. And as the information gets more technical, you're gonna have to watch it a couple times, just because it's a lot of stuff that you're gonna have to actually physically do. The earlier ones was all about changing the mindset. It was to get you prepared for the information that I'm gonna give you, maybe a little bit more coming down the line. But even in just the last couple of videos, they've been a little more technical than usual. And this is not to say we're not going to hit mindset again. I definitely will. But this is stuff you need to know. And I do it because I want to help. And so I do it because, you don't want to see these mistakes go on and on, generation after generation, person after person, for as long as it's been going on. And it's just because we don't always get the information that we need. So thank you so much. I appreciate you guys, and I will see you